Which of these Canadian books should you read? Just stay tuned and you'll find out. Hi, hello, how are you? My name is Sara from Sara's Reading Nook, and today we are going over the Canada Reads competition. If you're new here, hi, welcome. Me and my cat Olivia, we make new videos and we post them every Sunday, hopefully Wednesdays, sometimes Fridays. So what even is Canada Reads? Well, I do have a previous video, and I talk about the Canada Reads read-along between me and Laura from Laura Reads Pages. And what we're basically doing is reading all of the books that were nominated for Canada Reads 2021. This is a competition that I think there's been like 20 competitions in the past. There are 5 selected books that are up for debate. Panelists, essentially, they choose books. They have a long list initially of about 10 books, I believe, and then they break it down to 5 books. And those 5 books are the Canada Debates books for that season. Who gets to debate the books? Well, they choose 5 champions, which consist of like celebrities, athletes, prominent figures in Canada, and they will represent the different books. So this competition, it spans all the way back to 2002, and either around here or down in the list below, I will link a few of the different previous winners that you may or may not have heard of. Now this year, going into it, I had not really heard much of the 2021 books. But once they were announced, that's like literally all I heard about. And all the bookstores, they were prominently shown to us. Good luck trying to get these books out from the library. These books have been selling like hotcakes, I feel. And especially with people having time to stay at home and read. So now I'm gonna go over the different books, what they were about, some themes, who it was represented by, how I felt about that process, and my thoughts. So the first book that I read was Two Trees Make a Forest, and that was by Jessica J. Lee, and it was championed by Scott Hellman. So the description: a chance discovery of letters written by her immigrant grandfather leads author Jessica J. Lee to her ancestral homeland in Taiwan. There she seeks his story while growing closer to the land he knew. Lee hikes, she bikes flatlands where spoonbills alight by fish farms, and learns about a tree whose fruit can float in the ocean for years, awaiting landfall. Throughout, Lee unearths surprising parallels between the natural and human stories that have shaped her family and their beloved island. Some of the key themes in this book include migration. For example, Jessica's grandparents, they moved from China to Taiwan after the Civil War ended in 1949. So gaps is another theme. Gaps between fault lines, languages within families. Mixed race identity is a theme. Mapping, language and translation, and memory, which was one of my favorite aspects of this book. Jessica is an environmental historian, so this book is actually nonfiction. She's also the winner of the 2020 Hillary Weston Writers Trust Prize for Nonfiction, the 2020 Boardman Tasker Award for Mountain Literature, and the 2019 RBC Taylor Prize Emerging Writer Award, among other accolades. She has a PhD in environmental history and aesthetics, and she currently lives in London, England. So I find it really fascinating that Scott Hellman was representing this book. He's 25 years old, he's a singer-songwriter, and he's from Toronto, Ontario. Now, in terms of what I thought about this book, so in this book, I appreciated the environmental information that we learned throughout, and also I found that it was fascinating to sort of see her journey to understand her grandfather and her family's sort of journey to Canada. I am among the first generation, born in Canada from my entire family, so she does cover some really important aspects that people who are of immigrant family backgrounds sort of question, like, where is home? For her, is it in Canada? Is it in Taiwan? Is it in England? Like, she talks about having a multiplicity of homes, and I think that it's a very important story, definitely. However, unfortunately, I feel like this book felt very fragmented. For me, if it was presented in a different way, it probably would have had a more lasting impact. So I did give this one a 3 stars out of 5. I did think it was fascinating. Now, in terms of the debates, I think that Scott did have a little bit of a challenge. What I say sort of echoes what quite a lot of the debaters were talking about. That being said, even though it was eliminated in the first round, I think that he did an excellent job of defending it. And I think he came out of the debates as quite a strong debater. Okay, now here's where I get to talk about my favorite. Here are the books. Stop right now and see if you can guess which one of these was my favorite. Okay, done? That's right. My favorite was The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. Set in a fantasy land named Chasland that feels like the Regency area in England, The Midnight Bargain is a fantasy about a woman named Beatrice Clayton who makes her debut at bargaining season, an annual event where wealthy young men and women gather from all over the world to make advantageous marriages. But Beatrice dreams of becoming a full-fledged magician in Chasland and pursuing magic as her calling, as men are allowed to do. Themes that are in this book include women's bodily and political autonomy, patriarchy, socioeconomic mobility, intersectional class struggle, and love and romance. So I think that the themes really kind of hit home for me when reading this book. These are all just like issues that I think are relevant to today and are interesting to read more about and to explore. And though this is a fantasy novel, there's so many parallels that come back to the core of this book, which is still, being discussed by society today. So let's talk a little bit about the author. So C.L. Polk is the World Fantasy Award-winning author of the critically acclaimed book Witchmark. That book was nominated for the Nebula, Locus, Aurora, and Lambda Literary Awards. It was named one of the best books of 2018, according to NPR, Publishers Weekly, BuzzFeed, and the Chicago Review, Bookpage, and the Barnes & Noble Sci-Fi and Fantasy blog. So C.L. Polk lives in Alberta, Canada. They won the World Fantasy Award, come on. I listened to the audiobook. Now, the audiobook was just so beautiful. It was beautifully narrated, beautifully written, and the linear progression was fantastic. And I was invested. Since I opened that book, or I guess since I pressed play, it was so, it was good. And I read it all in one sitting. Yeah, I haven't done that in a very long time, forever. It is so cool. The love and romance, I feel, is very strong, and I think depicted just a romance. That wasn't quite a chef's kiss, but I wanted it to be. I love Beatrice's pursuit in order to become a full magician in a society where she cannot become a full magician. And it was just written so beautifully. Now, this book was championed by Rosie Etta. She is an Olympian and broadcaster. And it wasn't just because it was my favorite book of the 5, but she was also my favorite debater. If I could learn how to debate as well as she can, and have her composure and have her wit, her flawlessness, she's funny, she's relatable. She's an Olympian, but she's so relatable. And it was so awesome too to watch her interview with the author C.L. Polk on the CBC website. And I love that she used literally every opportunity that she could to plug the book. So even after the book was voted out, she still would have the book and be now in The Midnight Bargain, that theme was, she just always brought it back to The Midnight Bargain. She was fantastic, phenomenal. And what was such a tender, genuine moment was when Rosie asked C.L. Polk for advice on how to conduct herself during the debate. That interaction, you should watch that video. It was so adorable because you could see this mutual admiration for each other, this mutual affection, and it was so wholesome. So I gave The Midnight Bargain 4.5 stars. I think it is one of the best books that I've read in quite a bit of time. Okay, next book I completed was Hench. You know, Hench was a pretty cool book, not gonna lie. So Hench was by Natalie, Zina, Walschots. So in brief, Hench is the story of a woman who pays the bills by doing administrative work for villains, but then an incident involving the world's most popular superhero leaves her injured and gets her fired. She ends up realizing what happened to her isn't unique, and she might have the means to take down the so-called hero who hurt her. How? With every office worker's secret weapon, data. Some of the themes that are explored in here: revenge, perseverance, friendship and found family, accountability, and power. So one of the things that's really cool about Hench is that in this book, it's told more from the henchman or the villain perspective, and it challenges you to go outside of what we are just conventionally told, which is superheroes are good, villains are bad, and the world is essentially black and white. This book will challenge your viewpoint of that. It also goes over the team dynamics. It also makes you think of the people who are surrounding or supporting the major leaders in the story and giving them their own unique background story. In this case, the protagonist, or Anna, she is not the main villain, but she is a hench person. So in terms of the book, I thought that the book was narrated super well. I thought that it was funny and clever, and it reminded me of some people who I know who work in science, like myself, and that analytical viewpoint of the world. The presentation of morality and the other key themes that I mentioned before, I thought was done really well, but still the book did fall short for me. In terms of the plot, I wasn't that intrigued by it, but also the progression of the plot, I wasn't really a fan of, but I did really like the writing. So I did end up giving this a 3-star out of 5-star rating. Paul Sun-Hyung Lee was the champion for Hench in the debates, and he is an actor. He's an actor in Kim's Convenience, which you can see on Netflix. I think he did a very good job presenting Natalie's book. He was so kind and considerate, and I thought it was so cool that this was a book that resonated with him so much.
Come on, were you eating? Come on.
He was just a total joy and pleasure to watch. And here comes little Olivia. She liked Hench. Good girl. So yeah, I did give it about 3 out of 5 stars. It was a very fun read. Alright, so the next book that I read was Jonny Appleseed, and that was by Joshua Whitehead. Jonny Appleseed is about a two-spirit indigiqueer young man who has left the reserve and becomes a cybersex worker in the big city to make ends meet. But he must reckon with his past when he returns home to attend his stepfather's funeral. Some of the key themes are the intersectionality of queerness and indigeneity, NDN, time, and family and kinship. So who is Joshua Whitehead? Joshua Whitehead is a two-spirit member of the Ekwuyasi First Nation, Treaty 1. He is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Calgary. Now, initially this book was difficult for me to read. There is a lot of, I guess, coarse language in this book, and that sort of threw me off a little bit. It was pretty jarring at first. But I came back to the book because during the debates, the mention of how, healing this book was very well discussed. And what I appreciated the most from this book was the healing nature of the book. I came to that sort of conclusion. And I love to see how Jonny sort of helped so many people in his life. And I think that this author's perspective is written from a voice that I think really needs to be heard. It's one that is underrepresented, overlooked. And so to have a book like this is really amazing. One thing I loved more than anything else in this book was the pure relationship between himself and his cookum, or his grandmother. It was just such a pure relationship, and it is one that, just listening to the book, you can't help but just have this incredible affection towards their relationship. Now, Devery Jacobs was the champion, and she was the one who was representing this book. And she did such a good job. I mean, obviously she won the debates, but she was able to connect to the story quite well. Devery Jacobs, she is an award-winning Mohawk actor and filmmaker. I thought that she had just such a great debating style, and she had just like such respect and showed so much respect for all of the authors, all of the debaters. So I ended up giving that book a 4 out of 5 stars. And so the last book that I read was Butter, Honey, Pig Bread, and this was by Francesca Ekwuyasi, and the story is quite complex. Butter, Honey, Pig Bread is a novel about twin sisters Kihende and Taia, and their mother, Kabirinachi. Kabirinachi believes that she was a spirit who was supposed to die as a small child. By staying alive, she is cursing her family, a fear that appears to come true when Kihende experiences something that tears the family apart and divides the twins for years. But when the 3 women connect years later, they must confront their past and find forgiveness. Some of the themes that were presented in this book are family and kinship, women's relationships, dealing with trauma, and food/appetite. Now, how I felt about this book. I have never read a book like this. It had such a strong sensory element and represented food as a large theme of this book. It also goes over trauma, so I would suggest that you look at the content warnings ahead of time before reading this book. And it showed complexities in families and how, especially in female relationships and families, they can be quite complex. It showed such an array of characters. Like, they had so much depth to them in such complex relationships. And I don't want to give away spoilers, but food was sort of used as a community tool. Everything from the preparation, the sharing of food, how it's consumed or taken in, and how food can help us communicate with each other, even if you don't necessarily have the words to. Now, Roger Mooking, he was a very fierce debater. He went all in, and I think that he did quite an excellent job of that. And I think he was able to relate to this book on that food level, that culinary level, just like so well that it had such a major impact on him. It is hard for me to flat out recommend this to others. There are some heavy themes that are dealt with in this book, but I felt it was just a wonderful debut by this author. And just to tell you a little bit more about Francesca, so she is a writer, artist, and filmmaker who was born in Lagos, Nigeria. Her work explores themes of faith, family. Her writing has been published in Winter Tangerine Review, Brittle Paper, Transition Magazine, and the Malahat Review, among others. And Butter, Honey, Pig Bread is longlisted for the Scotiabank Giller Prize. I would have to give this book around a 4.25, 4.5 stars. This book and The Midnight Library were my favorites. So those are the 5 different books. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Laura for being a fantastic host. And if I were to say one book that you should definitely read, if you like fantasy, read The Midnight Bargain. If you like nonfiction, read Two Trees Make a Forest. If family dynamics are of interest to you, Jonny Appleseed and Butter, Honey, Pig Bread would both be excellent books. And if you are interested in exploring genre fiction, I would recommend Hench. So that is everything for today. Bye!